Hello, everyone. Thank you for coming. Welcome, and thank you so much for joining us for our first webinar this year. The webinar title is "Future Equals Flexible: The Future of Work and Its Impact on Meeting Rooms and Shared Workspaces." We're very excited you were able to join us today, and we'll hope you come back for our next webinar. The next webinar coming up is Level Up, the Next Generation of AV Technology Management. And that's on May 19th. There we're going to be discussing a formalized AVIX technology management strategy that's focused on creating speed, agility, and consistency at scale in your deployments. If this sounds interesting to you, keep an eye out for the email following our webinar today. That will include a link to register to the next webinar, as well as a satisfaction survey that we'd love you to participate in. Also, keep an eye out for our upcoming 3-day bootcamp, Technology Management 101, where we'll dive into the 3 core phases of our technology management framework, and we'll help arm you with some tools you can use to elevate your technology strategy as we head into the future of work. Let's see here. So, just a quick comment on that. That is going to be, again, a 3-day boot camp, and we're looking May, like late 2021. But if you keep an eye out for our social pages, you can like, follow, or subscribe to any of those, the links of which you can find in the chat here shortly. And that's the best way to stay appraised of how the timing is going to work for those. All right, quick housekeeping. We're going to be using the Q&A for questions today, so feel free to submit your questions there. And please, if you find a question that you also would like answered, feel free to upvote it using the little thumbs up button. That would be really helpful for us to prioritize the questions that are coming in. All right, so let's move on to our topic of the day. As the US economy rapidly approaches the end of the pandemic, there is a strong trend toward a continued form of remote work. All companies are weighing how much can be done remote and what impacts there may be from such a shift. Companies like Facebook, Twitter, Square, REI, Coinbase, Dropbox, Hitachi, Shopify, Slack, Spotify, even Zillow, they've all announced some sort of permanent remote work from anywhere strategy, while other companies like Google, Microsoft, Ford, Nationwide, Salesforce, HubSpot, and Intuit have announced hybrid models that allow sort of some kind of workday flexibility. Gartner's reported that 82% of company leaders plan to allow employees to work remotely some of the time. Enterprise Technology Research reports that of the 1,200 CIOs interviewed, on average, they expected permanent remote work to double to 34.4% of their company's workforces in 2021, compared with 16.4% before the coronavirus outbreak, a result of positive productivity trends. And McKinsey & Company found that while the majority of the global workforce cannot work remotely, up to 1/4 in advanced economies can do so 3 to 5 days a week. However, there is a large dissenting opinion here, a kind of dark side to remote work, and I think that it's nicely summarized by my favorite optimist, Simon Sinek, in the following clip.
Take it from someone who's run a virtual company for over a decade. Trying to build trust without any kind of human contact is way more difficult. And I think one of the big mistakes that a lot of organizations have made is because we've adapted reasonably well to teleworking, we're missing the fact that many of the relationships pre-existed. You know, we know these people. Good luck building trust with somebody who's entirely new to the team and has never met anyone. That's very different. Because remember, you know, we build trust between the meetings. Isaac Stern said, music happens between the notes. Well, trust happens between the meetings. You build trust when you're walking in and you're a little early and you're making small talk. You build trust as you're walking out and you're still talking about the meeting as you're walking out. You build trust when you bump into somebody in a hallway and you go, oh, I've been meaning to talk to you. You build trust when you knock on someone's door and you say, you got a minute? You build trust when you say, you want to have lunch? And it's these social interactions over and over and over again. No one of them does it, but like brushing your teeth, you know, brushing your teeth for 2 minutes does nothing. Do it twice a day, every day, it keeps your teeth clean, right? one of those things does nothing, but the consistency of that human interaction over time builds this thing called trust. And it's way more difficult to do, not impossible to do, but way more difficult to do virtually, because now you actually have to schedule that time, because there is no such thing as between the meeting. You show up for the call and that's it. You have the call, and when the call's done, you all get off. There's no human interaction. And so the way you do it is you have to schedule times for personal stuff. Like you actually have team huddles where you get on Monday and you say, what's on your heart and mind? And here's a fun or poignant question to answer. Let's go around the room. And you do not talk shop at all. You don't talk about what the schedule is. You don't talk about results. You don't talk about the work. You give people an opportunity to share what's on their heart and mind. You have virtual lunches with people where you log on and you just have lunch. And even then, even on virtual teams, you still want to meet at least once a year as a group to solidify those bonds. And by the way, brainstorming sessions, anything to do with ideas, oh my God, they're impossible to do virtually. You just don't have the same flow of ideas. You can't interrupt each other easily. Interrupting each other virtually is rude and disruptive. Interrupting each other, in a meeting where there's 10 of us is easy. It's no big deal. You can have 4 people talking at the same time, and it's fun because we're all in the same flow and in idea generation. So I think we have to accept that, yes, the ability to telework means that we can keep these organizations functional and moving during these pandemic times. And for companies that think they never need to go back to the office, they're in for a shock. I think what will happen, and I think if you ask me to envision the future of work, is, especially in the military, you didn't realize you had this component until you were forced to. And I think what will happen both in military and in private sector is things will become a little more fluid, where people will actually have the option to telework when they can and when they need to. So it's not like, hey, next Thursday, do you mind if? It'll happen where somebody just emails in the morning saying, I'm working from home today. And it's fine. It just becomes a fluid part of our workday and way more socially acceptable. People working a half day in the office, people working a half day from home because they got to deal with something. They don't need to take a day off. It just becomes a lot more flexible. I think that's more likely. Some sort of balanced equation.
So I think Simon has a really poignant observation there. It's clear that there are positives and negatives to remote work. And the most logical conclusion seems to be some kind of hybrid or flexible approach where employees have a degree of choice in where they spend their time. And employers work to make the office an enticing place for their teams to come, collaborate, and build relationships. As experts in intelligent spaces and collaboration technology, we, the AVIX industry, are uniquely qualified to help create the incredible experiences that will empower organizations to bridge this gap, enabling them to take advantage of the new flexibility, the talent pools, and the dynamism of remote work without losing the relationships and trust that make up the connective tissue of our teams. So today, we're going to discuss what's changed, what some of the strategies are for successfully reacting to these changes, and what are some of the next steps we may have in getting started implementing these strategies. So let's introduce our panelists and dive in. Okay, get everybody all situated here. And we will start with our introductions. I'll make sure you guys can see everybody. There we go. Cool. You see some friendly faces here. All right. So let's start with some introductions. Let you guys know who we've got here. So we'll start with Jeremy Elsesser. Jeremy is the president of Level 3 Audiovisual. He's a AQAV board member, PS9 Global Alliance Global Deployment and Service Oversight Committee member, and recipient of the AVIXA Educator of the Year Award in 2019. We have Jim Maltese, VP of Quality Standards, senior instructor for AVIXA, columnist for Sound and Communications, and recipient of the AVIXA Educator of the Year Award in 2017. And we have Jeff Bethke, VP of Engineering, Commercial Integrator, 40 under 40, frequent industry committee member, and avid Blitz and Trapper fan. That may have to be our first question. What is a Blitz and Trapper? My name is Fred Loucks, Director of Technology and Innovation, and our moderator for today. So let's dive in with the first discussion topic. Let's see. So let's take a trip down memory lane here. Now, a little over a year ago, back when COVID was nothing more than an AV connectivity manufacturer, we all sat at our desks after our commute and happily plodded away at our work between coffee breaks and random cubicle intrusions. Those were the days. We'd sit at we'd see a meeting coming up on our calendar, and most of the time we would get up from our desk, feels weird to say, and make our way to the appropriate conference room. And we'd walk in, sit down, and press join if we're lucky. And ta-da, the screen full of smiling faces wrapped in the Hollywood Squares frame would be staring back at us, ready to launch into the topic at hand. But wait, that's not really what it looked like at all, is it? If you remember, those faces that would pop up on the screen would primarily be from other conference rooms whose cameras would often peer down sharply from the top of the display or from a sidewall, or worse, the ceiling at the back of the room, much to my balding crown's chagrin. We often set our conference rooms to active speaker mode in order to blow up the video large enough so that we could see the faces on the far end, excuse me. Even those of us that were lucky to take a meeting from our desk or at home would often struggle making out the faces in each frame, relying on the audio stream to know what was going on, who said what and when. And on the other hand, if we had the audacity to dial in with video from wherever our exotic locale was, our face would be dominant in the in-room video experience, often being several times larger than that of any of the conference room participants. Now, it's not exactly a great experience. Not that we knew then. No wonder we so often share content over the top. Just turn video off, forget about it. People join by phone. So over the past year and more, our colleagues and customers have gotten used to a much more balanced experience. One face, one frame, just like what you see here. Pure Brady Bunch bliss. And now, as so many of us begin returning to the office, I have to wonder how we'll feel about this reversion of experience, especially when we consider that there will likely be more remote participants in our meetings from here on out, not less. The fact is, yesterday's conference rooms were designed to meet with people in other conference rooms. But what about the conference rooms of today and tomorrow? Jim, I'm going to start with you. What do you think we need to do? Do you think we need to be rethinking the way our conference rooms work and are designed in light of this shift to a flexible distributed workforce? Should we be seeking an experience more like what we've become accustomed to, or is it a lost cause?
No, well, thanks, Brad. I don't think it's a lost cause, but I do think we've gotten pretty spoiled over the last year, just like what you're saying. With FaceTime, with Zoom, with Teams, everyone is video conferencing all the time. And the unfortunate or the fortunate thing is that we've gotten a pretty good experience because we're a foot away from the technology. Even if we're a foot away, I could be using the microphone internal to my webcam and still have a pretty good experience. And I remember taking, CTSD, the design class from Infocom or Avixa, and they were so focused on video conferencing rooms providing a conversational communication, right? They had parallax angles so that the webcam can mimic eye contact. The audio had to be great. There wasn't any ceiling microphones because they were ridiculous. Everyone had a gooseneck microphone to bring the microphone very close to the mouth and just sound perfect. But, it's expensive, it's crazy, it's intrusive to the infrastructure. And so we've had a run of just good enough conference room experiences. And so just what you're talking about, like, have you conferenced with an actual room recently where some people are on their desktop at home and some people are in the conference room? Conference room is miserable. And I personally, I mean, I'm in the industry, right? But I've personally become acutely sensitive to poor audio. I mean, the video is ridiculous, like you were saying, everyone's the size of a dime, but I notice that I get fatigued when I try to talk to people in the room. And maybe, I don't know, maybe it's my experience. I've been doing a lot of late night calls with our wonderful clients in the Asia Pacific realm, which is fantastic, but it's late at night. And so I might be a little cranky. And I distinctly notice the difference in effort I need to put in to pay attention to someone in a room where I have echoes and ceiling microphones and all that going on versus someone like us who is in front of a great microphone, a great camera, and it's just easy to understand what they're saying. So I think the pandemic has definitely reset our experiential expectations with how we conference. And I think what used to be fine a year ago is now going to be very annoying to users in a few months. And so I don't really have a camera solution for the future of work to improve the meeting experience. You talked about auto framing cameras, and I think they're getting better, but more often than not, I find them disabled, because either they're too responsive or not responsive enough, and they move too quickly, or they finally capture someone and their question is done. So they're not quite there yet, in my opinion. But I mean, maybe as they get cheaper, maybe as software get better, maybe we deploy a bunch of them around the room. And so they're always auto framing and the software picks the best shot of the talker and it happens very quickly. And so I mean, that's a pipe dream right now, but I think that could be interesting. Audio, we can definitely improve upon. And it's unfortunate because there are so many incredible solutions out there that are great for video bar codecs or ceiling microphones. There's incredible advancements in technology in those areas. But when we deploy them, we really have to take into account the acoustic environment they're going into. And you can't force a square peg into a round hole. If you've got a very difficult acoustic environment, you really can't use the microphone that's going to be far away. You have to bring the microphones closer to the mouths. And this is especially true overseas, where architects don't really pay as much attention to RT60 and ambient noise requirements as we do in other areas. But and a story. So I had a client recently complaining that their video bar codec, so it's the codec that has all-in-one camera, microphone, speakers, all at the front of the room, and all of a sudden it started not performing well. And the reason it didn't perform well is because the client had to put 3-foot plexiglass dividers in the table. And so people were talking into plastic and the microphone was 20 feet away. So yeah, it's a challenge. And so anyway, moral of the story is, I believe people are going to be expecting a much higher quality of conferencing when they come back to work. We've just gotten used to it.
I have to say, just in quick response to that, Jim, that I feel like there's a bit of a challenge there because, yes, we've come to expect this really high quality experience, but this high quality experience is very inexpensive, right? This at home, at my desk, experience is this does not, this doesn't cost a lot. And when I hear quality, I inevitably hear expense, which seems to me that there's a big force pushing in the very opposite direction, in particular in commercial and corporate AV, where we've got this, as Simon Dudley puts it, this Honda video conferencing phenomenon, right? Where we don't really do the Mercedes-Benz conference rooms as frequently anymore. We're really focused on these sort of Honda conference rooms because we need so many of them. So I'm curious, to hear from the group here, any response to how do we do that in a cost-effective way that our customers aren't going to balk at? Because I feel like there is a huge need within the industry, within our customers and our colleagues, that to really just want that price down so that they can deploy more of these spaces. How do we balance that? Any thoughts on
that? I'll jump in. That's a great question, Fred. And I had a couple of experiences that I wanted to share as well that were really eye-opening for me on that return to work question. The first question you answered, which is how do we start dealing with a higher quality experience, but somehow lessening the price of that experience and upping the quality. Well, we're going to need to lean pretty heavily on our hardware manufacturers and software partners to be able to help us provide solutions. And I'm happy to say that the last couple of years have seen significant leaps in those hardware platforms that are allowing us to get a better quality experience. But it also speaks to, maybe the size of room and how many people you're trying to put into a room. But I wanted to share just 2 comments. One, I had my own aha return to work, because everyone, including us integrators, experience our own return to work and have a lot of us distributed and working from home. So recently, I actually scheduled a meeting with some of my team members and just put it in the conference room, because I planned on being in that office that day, and it was just the normal workflow. And I was excited because I'm expecting my teams to show up in the conference room, and I show up in the conference room and there's the whole team on the screen working from home. And I'm by myself in a conference room at the head of the table. And it was such that moment of like, well, the expectations are different now. We schedule every meeting to be a cloud video platform enabled meeting because of all of the things that have led up to 2019 and going into 2020. What I think is interesting about 2020 and what happened for us remote participants is, do you guys remember when you would be the one remote participant in a room full of people and it was as if you weren't even there? So often the people in the room wouldn't even acknowledge the remote participant or have a conversation or gesture to them. So you always felt like you were outside the conversation. That has shifted dramatically in the last year for me, to where people are now so often the remote participant and feeling that experience that they are now training themselves and reteaching ourselves how to embrace and how to engage virtually. Somebody mentioned it earlier. Simon Sinek mentioned it. Interrupting people. You can't interrupt people. We've all learned that that's not how you video conference. And it's pretty great because there's a lot of effort that's been put on by everybody to try to make this communication style as impactful and capable as it possibly can be. So to say that we need to rethink how we're using rooms, here's the second item. We all decided that we wanted to get together and do a training on a piece of software. In the past, it might have been, hey, let's jump in the conference room. Somebody's going to present their screen and we'll all look at it together. And then the decision was, no, let's not get in the conference room. Let's all go back to our separate desks, because then we have full screen view of the content right in front of us, and we can actually accomplish more by having that type of accessibility to the software that we are doing. So I believe a complete rethinking strategy is needed for how we use and expect our conference rooms to function.
Yeah, totally agree, guys. And we've seen remote workers, and I've seen this, in organizations, right, where you've got the person on the remote end, and there's maybe one person on the other end and 20 people in the meeting space, and yeah, they're totally ignored. Well, now those people have, IT's giving them better cameras at home. We're all on video platforms now, so there's a lot more video, being shared, and people are going to expect that better, audio quality, that better audio experience. We talked about cheaper rooms, right? But I can see a world where, the remote worker is now a bit more empowered to maybe look somewhere else, right? If they're not getting what they need from their current company, because everyone's adopted this, right? The whole world had to shift their mindset. So in a way that, organizations used to use their office space to attract talent, the always fully stocked kitchen and, the keg of beer in the kitchen or whatever it is, right? Now, well, what's the quality of your conferencing systems? Because I'm going to be working from home, and I'm not going to spend all day long meeting with my team members in conference rooms with bad audio systems where I can't hear, and it's hard to engage, and it's hard to, get work done.
That's an
So
awesome
companies
point.
might need to spend more money, right? They might need to just change their mindset from the top down and say, you know what, we need to shift our budgets and spend more money on rooms until the technology can catch up.
Yeah, Absolutely. And I've seen that as I've done a little bit of industry analysis on, what are some of the big organizations saying about their change in strategy. And a lot of it is the office as a recruitment tool. And how is that? And it was before, it certainly was before, but how it's being pitched is a little different now, just a little bit, in that these spaces are really meant not as the place where you're going to sit 5 days a week, but more where you are, where you're going to come in for a specific purpose, for a specific period of time with your team or with a group of people who work similar to you. So I definitely think there's some validity to that. And as we get into the second portion of this, where we can talk a little bit about some of the strategies you might take on changes in room design, some approaches we might take to help remediate some of the experiential issues around audio and video in this kind of shifted environment. In the meantime, I'd like to move us on to the second topic for this section. And Jeff, this one's for you. So, in response to flexible work, many companies are changing the way they think about their office locations. Rather than focusing on office headcount and individual workspaces, there's this push towards the concept as the office as a collaboration hub and community gathering space, just like we were saying. It's a place to work together and build relationships when video conferencing doesn't fit the bill. And while conversations of transforming offices to collaboration hubs sounds like music to the ears of most of us in this industry, it raises questions about direction and approach, and maybe some of our new partnerships or alliances we might have. So what kinds of spaces do you think will be in the highest demand for the workplace of the future? Do you think maybe we need new kinds of spaces we haven't had before? And are there some kinds of spaces that don't hold relevance anymore? Your thoughts, please.
Yeah, so I think it's really interesting to think back before COVID, right? The open office concept was on its way out, right? There were no shortage of reports and studies that showed these open office concepts, putting lots of people into just a big open space. It actually decreased collaboration. People, reported more sick days, higher stress levels, right? And what happened was, some employees retreated to headphones, right? Blocking out the noise. So they brought themselves back into their own personal space and used instant messenger and other things for communication. When they had to do, video calls or even audio calls, they didn't have a great space to go that was private. So we did see a drive towards higher volumes of smaller, cheaper, video enabled rooms, right? To support that quick, hey, I need some privacy, I've got to go get a meeting, or you and me, let's go hop on a call with a vendor because we've got a Zoom meeting, and finding a small space to have that call. So not even post COVID, but now it's a different story, right? Because we've got a more distributed workforce that's, right, probably a permanent change, right? You're going to have a lot more people working from home, less people in the office. So I think the key is connecting office workers, right? Those who are in the office with, those who are at home. And like you said, the research has shown that majority of people don't want to come back full time, to an office. But we've got to remember, some workers never left, right? They had hands-on jobs, required physical presence with, the tools that they need to do their job, and their coworkers who used to be just down the hall and could, hop up and walk down and say hello. They're at home, right? And so we need technology to connect, right, those people together. And it's video, like we said, it's audio, it's high quality content sharing that connects these people together. But we've all experienced, as Jeremy mentioned, the types of meetings that we used to hop into a room and do. Some of them work a lot better on Zoom and Teams and on a video platform, right? Because the content is, full frame. So I do think that the reason for going in will be more of this, we've got to get together, as Simon was saying, right? People want to get together. They need a break from Zoom meetings, right? We've all heard of Zoom meeting fatigues at this point. Like, I got to get out of my house. I got to get away from my desk And you know what? I also have a team that I work with, and we've got some things that we need to do that, frankly, do work better, brainstorming and ideating in person. So I don't think we know which spaces are going to survive, and which ones are going to go away. But I think we're going to be reimagining the existing footprints. So where we used to have permanent desks, those might go to hot desks and use hoteling software, services that can, help manage, a more of a shared space for people who are coming in and out, that fluidity of working from home and working from the office. But, I think it starts with understanding the needs of every business unit, and discover and brainstorm with them and determine, who is going to be staying home, who is going to be coming into the office, who's permanently in the office, and then looking at the space and trying to plan for that. And then what types of meetings, are happening? Is it more whiteboards? Are we looking at technology to help digitize these analog, tangible things like Post-it notes on a wall and, marker boards for brainstorming. And there are going to be people who are remote that are not going to be there, right? As we talked about, there's team members that are going to join your team from different cities, different countries, because, people, remote work is embraced and people are going to, be working with companies where they don't live. So we've got to consider, how do we make those people, continue to make them feel like they're in the room as much as possible.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right, Jeff. I don't think we know what the future holds, but and I just had an aha moment as you were speaking and bringing that together with what Jeremy said just before. I think it's interesting how the shape of the tables are changing. And this was something I was trying to wrap my head around, where typically, if you think of a conference room, there's a big long table where everyone is meeting in that meeting and interacting together around the table. And every now and again, they'll look up at the presentation. It's miserable for conferencing because of the camera angles and the experience. What we're seeing more of is these just wider table, almost like an immersive telepresence table, or huddle spaces where the entire table of participants is opened up to the screen. And for me, I think that's indicative of the meeting spaces putting more focus and more intention and more importance on the far end. And that just clicked in my head. It's the shape of the table and where the focus is on the room. Is it on internal meeting with the people in the space, or are you opening it up to the people on the far end? And I just thought that was very interesting.
Yeah, and I think right on that there's likely going to be, and we may not know exactly what it looks like yet, but if we're envisioning the future a little bit here, which I think we have a bit of license to do, I'm inclined to think that one of the things that has to change is layouts. And I think we start to see more purpose-built layouts for purpose-built activities. So for example, we have more video conferencing participants. That might mean that our standard video conferencing rooms are open tables, right? C shapes, arcs, U's, things like that, things that allow for a better far end experience and allow for more comfortable and equitable camera angles for the far end. Especially multi-screen arrangements, right? I can definitely see, if you haven't seen them yet, check out the Urban Immersive Data Presence systems. They're fantastic in the way they're laid out. They look a lot like the old telepresence systems from Polycom and Cisco and others, but they're these are native Zoom rooms, which is just incredible to see. We're talking triple screens, elevated seating, wide open, and especially when you consider things like Zoom Smart Gallery features. What they announced at Zoomtopia this last year, that they're starting to look for faces in that single video frame and bring them in as individual frames in the video conference. And that, I think, is probably the most innovative thing I've seen in this space yet, where we're now able to take a single very high resolution camera, and 4K and 8K are paving the way to this on camera sensors, because you start doing digital zoom and cropping, or you got to have really high resolution source image. But you start getting these really high resolution source images. Now Zoom's saying, sure, I see Jim and I see Jeff. I will give frames to each of the people that I see. Then that table layout becomes so much more important, but you've just solved for the far end video experience and the in-room video experience. A single face for every frame. And because the room knows you're in a room, you're in that room, it's not going to show you all of your individual frames necessarily, right? It just shows you the people you're interested in seeing. There's a balance there because that's not a great experience if you want to sit across the table from somebody and collaborate. And so this is what I mean by, I feel like there are new room types or room types that we had that are going to get flushed out more, you know, like this, like the war room. I think that's a great example of this collaboration room or war room where maybe we have rooms that are really purpose built, focused on a collaborative task, you know, for a half a day or for 3 days. You know, one team in one space, they're going to travel in, right? It's a thing. And maybe if you have anyone remote, there's a, you know, a lesser experience for them. But you're focusing on starting to make purpose-built spaces for purpose-built reasons and then being able to adjust them. We'll talk about that a little bit in this next section. But it's very exciting to start to see maybe how some of these room types change. In 2 minutes, Jeremy, I'd like you to take a quick follow-on to that. And that is, so what about the all-team meeting space? I think that's a really interesting question in relation to what kinds of room types maybe we use and maybe we not use. What are your thoughts?
You know, it's it's a great question. We have a massive training room at level 3 that can support over 100 people, which is our entire company. And circa 2018, 2019, that entire company would come into that training room and we might have, you know, 8 or 10 participants, our remote employees that couldn't physically be there. Flip the script today and there's nobody in the training room. The all-team meeting is actually a better served to be just done on the cloud video platform with everyone at their desks. And when I say at their desks, that no longer means the desk at work, because quite honestly, a lot of people haven't been using their desks at work. So it brings up the question of, do you actually need a desk at work, right? But back to your question, Fred, we found honestly more engagement and more people able to show up when we went towards a full virtual all-team meeting approach, as opposed to you need to be physically in this space by 3 p.m. in order to get this information.
Yeah, makes sense. In my time in my previous life, we were even toying with using VR for this. So, you know, we're trying to, you know, very, very forward-thinking organization I was working for at the time, but, you know, trying to use VR and virtual campuses even to do this kind of thing. And there was a big lean in, and we were talking like, you know, volumetric capture studios and things like that. We were really focused on that. But I think it's interesting. I'll call it kind of a novel solution, but I think for most organizations, you see a lean in on video conferencing for those kinds of things, especially because those rooms, not only do they cost lots of time and energy and resources to get people there, but they're also extremely expensive to build. You know, hundreds of thousands of dollars typically for, you know, an enterprise all-team meeting space, $500,000 or more, and sometimes several million, depending on the organization. So I definitely see maybe a lean in on, hey, when we do that once a year get together as everybody, let's, you know, rent an event center, right? We'll go to, you know, Orlando or Vegas or something like that and get an event center and do the whole thing versus, you know, versus trying to have your own in-house facilities for that, the staff that it takes to run them for that event and maintaining them throughout the year. It's a lot.
Well, let me just bouncing off that, Fred, real quick, because Jeff mentioned on it too. Again, it's not only rethinking the physical space and the technology, but what are we having? What's the objective of this meeting, right? Our typical all-team meeting is to get some really critical information out to the company and keep everybody updated on a regular basis. Oh, and a byproduct of that was that we all got to get together and conform and get those relationship bonds sealed. Now we don't have that opportunity. So the all-team meeting doesn't provide the opportunity to get together. And to your point, there's going to be a rethinking and a refocus of making sure that there is space and time set aside for that all-important connective tissue that needs to happen in person.
Absolutely. Awesome. Let's move into our second section because we are blowing through time and we're going to have to keep moving here. So let's hit this next prompt. And Jeremy, this is for you. So It's often said that the future of work is data-driven. I hear this theme a lot when I'm researching what future of work means and making this data-driven or responsive workplace. And that makes sense. In order to make a more dynamic workplace, business leaders are going to need to make decisions more dynamically too. And those decisions have to be informed by real-time data. While our industry is, admittedly talked a good game about data analytics in the workplace, I think the reality is left a lot to be desired personally. So I'll ask the question, what do you think we need to be doing better in regards to providing data to our leadership teams? Where do we start? What does success look like? And let's take that in 5 minutes or so.
That's a great question, Fred. Thanks for framing that up for me. And I'm going to start this with just a couple of really interesting, mind-boggling data statistics to get everybody thinking properly. Over 2.5 quintillion bytes of data are created every single day. That was as of Jan 1st, 2021. Over the last 2 years alone, 90% of the data in the world was generated. Okay. By 2021, this year, it's estimated that 1.7 megabytes of data, not megabits for you geeks out there, but megabytes of data will be created every second for every person on Earth. That is mind-boggling. And I got a great news statistic that's relevant here too as well. By 2025, there will be 75 billion Internet of Things devices in the world.
As the security world rolls their eyes.
Those are pretty mind-boggling. And I think the point that I'm making here is we've been in the land of big data for a long time. The question that you asked, Fred, is a really important one in our industry. I think in our industry more than a lot of other tech industries, because we're behind. All of us that have been managing technology, the clients out there that are responsible for large infrastructures and are managing multiple different ecosystems, you're collecting data. We're past the point now where our devices are no longer producing data. And if you go back in the AV industry, unfortunately, not very long ago, we had a lot of devices that didn't have any data to give to you. They were just serving a very specific function. And IT and network came along and said, hey, we want to put a network jack on that thing. Okay, we'll give you a network jack, but we're still not going to give you any useful actual data and performance out of it. Now we're in a world where almost every AV device has a network port on it to some degree, or it's connected to its own platform that is getting data. The challenge now is we have all this data in these various separate, non-related databases and places of information. It's unstructured data. So the AV industry has been famous for being able to generate ridiculous amounts of unstructured data. The answer to your question comes in the structuring of that data and adding the dimensions to it that allow business leaders to make really informed decisions about how they use their space. For example, and this is an easy one that everybody gets, great, we have a codec, it's generating data on usage of the room. We have a scheduling system, it's generating data on who scheduled the room. And we have an occupancy sensor now who's actually measuring how many people showed up. But how often are we looking at all three of those data points at the exact same time? And how difficult is it to get those data points aggregated together, time-stamped and approved, or applied to the appropriate slice of data to make it easy to make the decision? That's the future, is being able to take all the data that our devices are generating and bring them together in a meaningful way that's going to allow decision makers to have extra dimensions of decision making as they move into this next phase, which I think is so infinitely critical. You guys have talked a lot about the conference room of the old is not the conference room of the new. Is the tech that we used to use the same tech we're going to use moving forward? If ever there was a time in our lives to be having a data measurement and collection strategy so that we can actually get a success metric and measure how successful this next 12 to 18 months, there's a lot of organizations that are about to step into developing and designing collaboration rooms and rooms that they may not have invested in the past. and they're really going to want to know what the return on that investment is. And so it is critical right now to have a strategy in place of how you're going to bring that data together and what success looks like before we start building all these rooms.
Yeah, to share a story, I mean, I've been in meetings with architects and, you know, the owners, and we've looked at floor plans, and the simple question of, why are you building, why 15 conference rooms? Not a single person can answer the question, right, with any data backing it up.
And it comes back to the point, the data is out there. We're at a place in our industry where the data is there. It's just not together in a very meaningful way. And it takes a tremendous amount of effort. In fact, teams of analysts to pull the data together in a meaningful way so that you can make those decisions. We need to be able to make those decisions like that, because as we saw, things can change pretty quickly.
Yeah, it's interesting. As someone who spends a lot of their time trying to pull meaningful data out of audiovisual devices, I mean, I have to say, I'm fairly frustrated with the industry in this one, because while there is a lot of very useful data on most of these endpoints, it's extremely cumbersome to get. Most of this stuff is buried behind command line interfaces, because AV devices were never really meant to be managed by machines. They were meant to be managed by people. That's how they're all designed, right? Log into X, Y, or Z manufacturer's software suite and connect to your device, right? Not a generic SSH or Telnet, client or any other kind of interface. The problem is when you start to scale, and this is the problem I've run into several times now in my career, as you start to scale up your utilization of devices, your ability to put your hands on each one, virtually or otherwise, without automation is very limited, and things get away from you. That's just the fact of it. Things will go unmanaged, and same thing with the data collection. Things will go unmonitored. And so I think the industry has to do a better job, and specifically talking to my beloved manufacturer partners, there needs to be a much stronger approach to standardizing the data provided back to us through IoT standard interfaces. That's I think a huge piece of improvement that our industry can make in utilizing things like MQTT and other industry standard protocols and methods to get that data out. Fantastic topic, super interesting. And we're going to move on to the next one, but I think there may be a whole webinar just on getting data from devices. And I want to make a quick housekeeping note. We've got 10 minutes left, but rather than cut things short, I think we got to keep this going. I would like to, we're going to continue to talk. You will all get the recording. If anybody has to drop off, you're more than welcome to, and we thank you so much for coming. But I think we got a lot of good content to continue to go through. So we're going to continue to dive into some of these topics and may end up going a little bit over. So let's dive into the next one, and we'll keep things moving. So this next thing is around, this will be for you, Jim. So we've got this data now, right? So let's say that we've done a good job. We've gotten data for our systems. We're able to give it back to leadership. And 60 days after rooms are in use and they're consuming this data, leadership says, nobody uses rooms C and D. Let's replace them with smaller room types and save the equipment for our office across the street.
Yeah.
You've ever heard this before, I'm sure.
No, never. Not in this industry.
Historically, decommissioning, storing, relocating rooms has been really expensive due to the bespoke and physically integrated nature of the space. How do we accommodate this request elegantly without significant unnecessary spending and waste? I don't see how we can say we can be flexible and then still use the same old approaches that we've used. Right. So Jim, why don't you lead off here?
Yeah. And it's a great question, especially pertinent now that all the data we've been collecting over the past couple of years is probably going to not reflect what the current users' needs are post-pandemic with work of the future, people working from home. So this is where putting a lot of effort into your standard systems can save an incredible amount of money and headaches. Step one would be using similar hardware lines across a lot of different rooms. So it's much easier to reuse that equipment if you need to shuffle rooms around, if you need to rearrange a floor or something like that. We're also pushing for this idea of semi-static systems for a lot of our clients now. So as you said, historically, AV systems are pretty dug in deep in terms of room infrastructure. There are floor boxes, there's lots of cable pulls, power points, network data points. So with semi-static systems, there are a lot less pieces that are permanently attached to the room itself. And I know that it might have, it might invoke an image of like a middle school AV cart kind of squeaking into the room with a
No
wobble
carts.
wheel,
You
but
can't go, no carts. No carts. Okay, sorry.
but it's not the case anymore. The new systems, I don't know if you call them slimline credenzas or whatever, a cart. They look great. They house all the equipment, and they perform really well. So not only can they're modular, we can readjust them, we could redeploy them depending on what the space needs, but they are much easier to deploy quickly. There's less infrastructure coordination. It costs less. We said it costs less time, so it's fantastic. So if and when the lease is up, if it's time to redraw the floor plan, the entire deployment of systems are modular. So you can reuse them however you see fit. And the added bonus, which I'll probably get in trouble from our AVIX folks, is they are much easier to implement. And so a structured cabling team or an electrical contractor can get a bulk of the work done, or dare I say, maybe even the clients themselves. And so rightfully so, the AVIX industry is freaking out about this, but it's the way things are going, right? We can't really fight against it. It's a losing battle. And that's where forward-thinking integrators are rolling with this, and they're adjusting their services to better meet what the users are, what the clients are demanding. So I see a lot of value in standard systems with this idea of semi-permanence or semi-staticity.
Well, and when you pair that with, a good data capture and, analytics plan, great, I've got all this cool data, and it just told me that this room that I spent a lot of money on with, 16 in-ceiling speakers and all sorts of floor boxes and everything isn't working the way we thought it would. Well, it's too expensive for me to do anything about it anyway, right? But if it's built with a standard suite, of hardware, and you can anticipate, you know what, we're gonna break that room in half and make 2 rooms, or you know what, we're gonna take some of the components because they're all standard, and we're gonna deploy it or reconfigure it in a different way that better fits how we're seeing our users use that room.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think it's actually an opportunity for most of us in the integration space. It's actually, I think, a great opportunity for us to try and pivot from this, we have to do it all. We have to buy the gear and we have to install it. And that's our approach and our method, because I think that method is dying. It's much more challenging to get the entire project, right? Customers are able to buy a lot of this stuff on their own. And I don't necessarily think that's a bad thing, because our value has never been in providing hardware. Our value has been in knowing how it works and being able to do it, put it together and maintain it better than anybody else. And that's still a complicated thing to do, even with the simplest system for a video conferencing system. There's still interconnection, there's still configuration, there's still the lifetime of maintenance on that. And by maintenance, I mean software upgrades, configuration, right? Monitoring, data collection, all of that stuff still, that's, I think, where really a lot of the future of the industry lies in now. And changing our mind on that to say, hey, customer, if it's easier, more convenient, more cost-effective for you to put these semi-static systems in yourself, we'll assemble them and have them 100% ready for you, and drop them off at your place, and you go right on ahead and drop them in with a few bolts to the floor or whatever it might be, however it works, right? It's really exciting, and it allows customers to get to scale extremely quickly, to move extremely quickly on deployment on a lower cost than they could do with these permanent fixed systems. So I think there's a ton of opportunity in this space. It's really, really exciting. So Jim, thank you for the summary there. With that, I want to step into our next subject. And Jeremy, this one's for you. So now, even if we're able to, let's say, so we have the data, now we've got these flexible systems, or, physically flexible. So now we can move rooms according to the need and such. What about platform flexibility? So how do we anticipate a company-wide shift from Zoom to Teams, or a multi-UC environment, or the dreaded guest whose company only uses some other platform, right? I think one of the greatest challenges of the modern meeting room is enabling a room to join any meeting from any meeting platform. I consider this to be this is our white whale, right, of the industry. And there's been a lot of different strategies to try and enable this seamlessly, and with varying degrees of success. So, Jeremy, why don't you take us through the major interoperability strategies and what you think their futures might look like?
Wait, you're saying if I buy a Teams codec, I can't just call into a Zoom call? Is that what you're saying here, Fred? Holy cow. Yeah, interop. Geez, how many times do we have a conversation about interop and taking through the typical strategies? Well, the strategy for the longest time was interop doesn't work very well and it's really expensive. So let's go to a complete native deployment in our organization where everybody's using the same thing with the same software, because guess what? It just works because you're not trying to interop with somebody else. Well, that's great until you need to talk to somebody outside of your organization. And any integrator who's on this webinar, this is the conversation we're having every single day, right? I have a huge Webex deployment and we're starting to use Teams. How can I get my Webex codecs called into a Teams system? And unfortunately, the answer is not a straightforward one. It depends. And there's still a lot of solution providers, software manufacturers that are trying to not make it easy for interop to happen. And that's a business goal of the manufacturer, because guess what? If it doesn't interop with somebody else's stuff, but you really like the experience, you'll probably spend more money to create that experience, until people are now working from home. To your point, right? There was a lot of organizations that spent millions and millions of dollars on these immersive conference rooms that worked amazingly well talking to each other. But now you have more than half your workforce working from home, and that amazing experience wasn't suited well for cloud native platforms. And so people start embracing cloud native platforms. Zoom is a cloud native platform. Teams is a cloud native platform. I don't even need to be in a room to have this incredible experience. And the expectation now is, well, during the pandemic, everybody started using Teams because we didn't have a cloud solution. We had this really expensive on-prem deployment. But now I've got this group using Teams, and I've got this group using Zoom, and I've got this group using GoToMeeting, and I want all of them to keep using it. So is there a conference room out there that I can deploy that just allows me to connect into any of these rooms? Well, the state of that today is the answer is not in a native experience. You can't have a native Teams experience. You can't have a native Zoom experience and be able to connect to everything else. Thankfully, I've got some incredible engineering brain power on this webinar who have solved this many times over with the USB architecture. So Fred, for everybody on the call, you start with a native solution. Often people want that native experience because if you're all on Teams and it's Teams room to Teams room, it's a beautiful thing. If it's Zoom room to Zoom room, it's a beautiful thing. The parity of the experience is there across the board. The minute you want to connect a Zoom call to a Teams call, I've got to start going through legacy 323 infrastructure, potentially. I've got to start using cloud-based interop that's provided by a third party. In the case of Teams, right? There's 4 providers in the world today that you can go buy a cloud-based interop and get your standards-based codec connected into a Teams call. But that's only if it's a Teams call, and it's only if you have the cloud video interop service applied to your Office 365 account. Don't plan on scheduling a Zoom call and then inviting all your teams. It's not going to work through that. Now, I'm here to say that a lot of this has changed. Thankfully, the big 3, the Microsoft, the Zoom, and the Webex, they're starting to lean in. 2 of them, maybe a little bit more than the third one, about creating native interoperability within their platforms. Is it a perfect parity of experience? Absolutely not. But can I connect my Teams room to a Zoom call without having to invest in an additional third-party interop and license? Yes. Can I join a Zoom room to a Teams call without all of those things? As of today, those answers are yes, but there are more platforms out there than just Teams and Zoom and Webex. And so the USB bring your own codec, bring your own meeting, as I think we like to call it now, tends to be the ultimate flexibility in the meeting room. You lose some of that awesome native meeting experience with a native Zoom room or a native Teams room, but I don't care what you bring. You show up with a laptop, I'm going to provide you an incredible audio and video infrastructure to plug that laptop into, bring any software that you want, and have your meeting. The ultimate interoperability, if you will.
Yeah, it's almost a sidestep of it, right? You going to that USB really sidesteps the entire issue, and it's a lot easier than it used to be. Let's just put it that way. To do that. Barco will thank us, by the way, for using "Bring Your Own Meeting." I'm pretty sure that's their slogan for it, but the idea is sound. You know, you can sidestep the entire thing. Now, there's still the challenge of connectivity. You know, we're getting closer with USB-C. We're getting much closer to kind of a standardized connectivity, but connectivity still seems to be one of the biggest barriers to success on this, and making sure the right connectivity is available on every laptop and the right level of drivers and juice behind it. Of course, we've done the same thing with USB-C that we've done with some of our other connectors before by burying video streams in it now, and Thunderbolt and different protocols for the same connector. So there's some challenges that I think we have to overcome still, but ideally getting us down to a really simple connectivity, or as Barco would love to sell us, I'm sure, and they've got a good solution for this, a wireless connectivity option that's either application-based or some kind of a adapter like they use. So probably a few options on how to accommodate for that.
Yeah, two more comments in the future of this interop conversation, because for me, I've stayed on the edge of this for many, many years now because it's so relevant to everything that the integration industry does. Number one, there's a huge opportunity for our manufacturers out there to continue to push the envelope here and give us the ability to app switch. The whole idea of bring your own meeting, if I roll into a conference room and I plug in my USB, assuming I have a USB-C on my laptop, which is where that whole issue comes in, Fred, but I plug that in and I can do a WebEx call, and then I can close that WebEx call and I can pull up Teams and I can do a Teams call, and I can app switch on my laptop, and it works amazingly well. I'm able to go between these different conference platforms and leverage technology to give a good audio and video experience. What if we could do that without having to bring your own meeting? What if there was a room system or a solution that allowed for you to have room systems scheduled and registered into WebEx, as well as Teams, as well as Zoom, and it's just as easy as switching an app on the touch panel like you do on your PC? That's going to start to change the game. And me personally, I would love to see the future of conference room technology and the solutions and hardware that are going in to enable that take a page from that book, so that it isn't forcing our users to use one experience. It's meeting the users where the users are at and giving them the experience that they want.
And I think that'll come with maturity. I think everyone is still kind of jockeying for that market share, but once it calms down a little bit, I think we'll see more of that. But people,
I think I also said something
providers
that'll
are still
probably,
greedy. Yeah.
I think I said something that'll probably never happen also, which is all three of them being on the same device. But a guy can hope, can he?
Right.
Yeah, I definitely have I hold out a lot of hope for the managed switching experience. I think that's really kind of got some of the best potential, because it doesn't require any of the platform providers to create their own interoperability. It allows the hardware to deal with switching between the applications. That seems to be the holy grail to me, because it can keep everybody out of each other's hair. You still get a native experience. But to be able to, from a client join perspective, to be able to go join a guest client, just dynamically, seems really powerful to me. So I'm hopeful we'll see that out of some of our new application-based UC platforms in the coming years.
Yeah,
fantastic.
And to personalize that space too, right? So instead of even registering the room, can I hand off something from my laptop or portable device to that room system get it in and get that native experience across multiple platforms.
And have that experience be easy is the key part, right? How can I walk in? It knows that I'm there. It moves my meeting to the room. And when I walk out, it's gone and I don't have to worry about my credentials being on the system, right?
I think that's powerful. Good. That's a fantastic conversation, guys. We have one more topic to go through. So let's dive into that and then we'll go from there. So so we've built this really great environment of flexibility, you know, in the architecture here as we've discussed it, and we've realized, you know, what things need to be accounted for and such. But, you know, we have to start somewhere. And I think that's my biggest question as we kind of go from there. And Jeff, I'll take this to you. You know, what do the next steps look like? How can an organization that's trying to approach future of work, in particular, you know, the technology managers who are responsible for participating in that, how do we best approach taking our first steps? What do you think?
Yeah, so I think that, you know, we shouldn't be making decisions without any data, right? And then you're just really grasping at, you know, straws, trying to figure out, well, what are we going to actually put in, you know? So, you know, that means you need to talk to your people to start, right? But also validate what they're saying with solid data, you know, capture. So I heard a story the other day from a manufacturer who builds people counting systems. And they told me a story from, you know, a large customer. Their people were asking to get back into the office. They said, can you know, please reopen these offices. We're anxious to get back to normalcy. We're anxious to get back and see people. You know, and so the organization opened up some offices, right, to the tune of, I think it was, whatever the number was, $50,000 a month in utilities and kitchen stock and all sorts of these things. But they had, you know, a clear data capture solution in place that would tell them who is how many, not who, you know, they don't capture that personal information, but just how many people, you know, are using the space. And when you talk to the people, they said, we want to come back and be there. When they looked at the data, nobody went back. They changed their minds, right? They still stayed at home, and the offices were mostly empty. So, you know, that organization had the data to, you know, say, you know what, we're going to shut these back down again because we're spending a lot of money on this real estate, and really no one's coming back in. So, but I think it starts, you know, if you're doing a radical shift or you're trying to figure out what to do with your existing systems or how to get people back to work, you know, I think it starts with a technology partner. So finding a long-term technology expert, you know, to help you to help you gather information, brainstorm about solutions, you know, and spend the time to put that plan in place, like we talked about, you know, conduct some user interviews, right, and surveys. So talk to your employees and business units. How do they feel about coming back to the office? Why are you coming in? What sorts of meetings do you like better now on the computer than we had before? And what are you missing? What can't you do from home on a computer? And just start to, you know, gather that information. Maybe build a future of work task force, right, within your organization. Talk with senior leadership, you know, corporate real estate teams. Start to build a team around, you know, how you're going to start to address getting back. And then, you know, I think pilot programs and proof of concepts are super valuable. So you can pick a floor, a room, a group of users, and start to try to get some funding and test some new ideas, whether it's just furniture layout with a certain type of camera, whether it's IT platforms, you know, and track the use, track the experience, and get that data. So have those systems in place and understand which data you want to capture from the start, because you can build a pilot program and you might not get any useful data out of it, and then you're right where you started. You don't know if it's working or not. And, you know, iterate on that design, you know, get that feedback, and maybe you want to tweak one or two things. Do it to the pilot room, or deploy a second room, do some A/B testing with some different features and see which ones, you know, people like. So, you know, be prepared to deal with that change, because it's going to change. It's not going to be exactly what you think it is. So having that data to drive those decisions. And then consider the return on the investment. So if I spend a little bit of money to capture the data, look forward and say, what's that worth to me if it helps me make some really smart decisions based on that data? Is that going to save me from spending a lot of money on two of the most expensive things, which are real estate, right? And where you put people.
And what I'm taking from actually this whole webinar, which is, I hope it's valuable to our viewers. For me, it's been very enlightening. What I'm encouraging, what I'm hopeful about is the integrator engagement curve flattening out, where it used to be that, it would be up to the users to get their needs together, then maybe hire a designer or design it themselves, and then the curve would creep up, and then integration during the project phase would be huge, and then it spills off, and maybe some maintenance, and no one's paying any attention to the data. So what I'm hearing now is we should be encouraging our clients to engage early, talk about those standard systems, talk about proof of concept, so you get a nice, healthy early engagement. The project engagement may be less, depending on what types of systems you're rolling out. It might not be as crazy, it might not be as engaging, but it's still incredibly important during that middle phase. And then we want to maintain that relationship at the back end while we're not only collecting the data, but maybe doing a yearly review based on that data to help guide those programming decisions to loop it back around to the front end. So I really like that idea of flattening the engagement curve.
Yeah, it's absolutely brilliant. And it's super interesting to think, but kind of wrapping up the thoughts here. I think in many ways, the future of work defines the future of the audiovisual and integrated experience industry. It kind of drives a lot of what it is that we're doing too, because so much of what it is that we're so good at as an industry is creating experiences with technology. And that's what this entire future of work thing is about. It's about creating a really superior experience in the office such that people want to come in and they want to be there. And by the way, making those systems chatty enough that they provide the data you need to make better decisions about how to work on that. You have that iterative design-driven process. I want to encourage, just in the spirit of that, for our customer representatives on the phone or on the line here, I want to encourage you to get close to your partners on this one. Work with your integration partners, find those groups that you really trust and continue to lean in with them, because the design process, the integrator relationship process, a lot of that, it's shifting from it's time to build the building, let's get an integrator involved, to a long-term symbiotic relationship. And we'll have an entire other webinar that can go into more of the details of how we've done that somewhat successfully in the past, very successfully in the past. But it's very exciting to see that relationship expound. One other is on the other side of that for our colleagues in here in the integration space, you have a great opportunity to build these long-lasting, strong relationships with your customers that start way before the project. And that seems to me, in my opinion, to be really what the future of the AV industry is all about. Those long-term relationships that start way before the project and go way, way, way after the project, all the way through the next time we're dealing with that system. It transcends the individual rooms, moving away from project-based work to relationship-based work. So that's all the time we have for today. I wanted to give a quick thank you to our panelists for sharing their thoughts, and to all of our attendees for joining and exploring the future of work with us. Keep an eye out for the follow-up email, which will contain a survey, which we'd appreciate if you filled out, and a registration link for our next webinar. Hope this was beneficial to you and that you'll join us again. Until then, take care. See ya.